Hello, you beautiful people, and welcome to I Am the Hammer, the show in which I talk about all things Grey Knights. Well, today we begin a brand new mini series in which I am going to be teaching you, the Grey Knight enthusiast, everything you could possibly need to know in order to be successful to some extent with the faction. I can't wait. Let's dive in. So, what is this mini series all about? Well, today in episode 1, I'm going to be covering the basics, imagining that you're brand new to Grey Knights and you just want that kind of filler and want to know the key information. Episode 2, I'll then go into the micro aspect of the army, talking about the tips, the tricks, the combos, the sorts of things you can look to employ immediately onto the battlefield. Episode 3, I'll be focusing on the early stages of the game, so deployment, first turn, first and second, how to go about approaching it. Episode 4 will be understanding the overall macro game plan. So, how do you expect the game to progress over the 5 turns and how you can manage that? And then finally, what I will do is look at individual matchups and kind of things you as a Grey Knight player need to be aware of going into those specific games. But today we are, of course, looking at the basics. So I'm going to quickly go through my opinion, what the strengths and weaknesses are of the faction. I'm going to describe the army and detachment rule, just to make sure you understand that. I'm then going to cover all the core information you need. So the stratagems, the enhancements. I'm going to run down the units and why you might choose to take them. And then finally, I've got 3 different lists for you to potentially have a go at, all very different. So yeah. Strengths of the army. By far and away, the most important thing is your army rule. So at the end of your opponent's turn, you get to pick up 3 units and put them into deep strike, which is rather tasty because it enables you to have that maneuverability. You can get to any part of the board. Now, obviously, what you pick up is an important skill that we will discuss at a further point. But why is maneuverability so good? Well, first of all, it enables you to just be in a place where you can kill something that you think needs to die. Okay. Never is your opponent safe. You think about some of the slower armies out there, for example, I know Deathwing Knights, right? They let's say a deep strike down, they're in a place. They have no ability to go anywhere else apart from slowly walk forward and hope they can charge something. Grey Knights can go, oh, that's a scary thing. I'm going to go over to the other side of the board and deal with something else there. You can bring to bear a lot of firepower to a particular part of a board, wipe it out, not be hit back, and then come back over to another area and hit it. So your ability to allocate your targets or your units to take out targets is kind of like it's just so good for the with the rule. And secondly, obviously, it does in theory mean that secondary scoring is a lot better because you can pick up some units and then, oh, I've drawn behind enemy lines, pop 3 inch deep strike into there. So the ability to score those is certainly good. Although in Pariah Nexus, I would say it has probably got a bit worse than it was before in Leviathan. Durability is another key strength of the army. The entire army has a 2-up armor save. It also has a stratagem for armor of contempt, and then you can get covered pretty easily. What that means is quite often, unless they have AP3 shooting, you are taking a 2-up save. And that is obviously, for an elite army, having that durability is really, really important. They're the jank masters of the 40k universe. They've got 2 important things. They've got Mr. Deimos, a stratagem, which means you can teleport when someone gets close. And they've got Sigil of Exigence, which is an enhancement, which means when you're targeted, you can vanish and go somewhere else. And this combined with a couple of other things mean that they've just got really high levels of getting in your opponent's head, being all tricksy, and that can make a really big difference. Next up, output. Now, this is in some ways. So the base layer of combat for this army is strength 6, -2, 2 damage. It's basically all the infantry with a force weapon have that. It's pretty good, Strength 6, take that into most infantry. That's wounding on 3s or even 2s. -2, that puts things even on a 2-up without armor contempt, puts them onto a 4-up. Then 2 damage, we love that as a marine killer. So their output in some ways is pretty good. They've also got a lot of options for anti-infantry, as I say there at the bottom. Purifiers are amazing anti-infantry, and all the army generally has flamers or storm bolters, which means that they can just wipe through like the easier to kill bodies. The army also has a decent amount of OC. Obviously, Strike Marines are 2, but Terminators are 3 with a banner. Paladins are 2 with a banner. Dread Knights are actually 4, which is pretty good for a vehicle. So they've got some decent amount of OC. So they're quite good at denying the primary. They have game into nearly everything. And that's really, really important for Grey Knights. Singles wise, they have game into everything, but they don't excel into everything. But for teams, that's amazing because it puts you in a position where you can go and just get those draws, and you can take on those matchups which make the rest of your team go, oh no, I don't want to play that. You go, well, fine, I'll take that one for the team. Then you go score your points, and you can kind of do that whilst ignoring your ignoring your enemy almost, if you build your list in a certain way. And that means that in a team's environment, Grey Knights are really strong. So what weaknesses do they have? Well, they cannot kill vehicles, okay? A tougher matchup is one where you play into lots of vehicles because their output isn't great into them. The best gun, realistically, they have is the Dread Knight Strength 10 gun, the heavy side cannon, and that means that you're still wounding often on 4s and or even 5s. When you're hitting on 3s already, it's not ideal. And they've only got 5 attacks in combat as well. So if you're playing into lots of vehicles, obviously the Strength 6 in terms of your infantry combat, that means you're wounding on 5s or even 6s sometimes. So they really struggle to kill vehicles, which is obviously quite an issue in certain metas. They have a low model count. That means if you're playing into armies which trade well, you're going to struggle there. I've played into games like Marines recently where they had a core of very killy things, but then they had lots of chaff. And the chaff was in all the annoying places, and as soon as I went out to go and deal with the chaff, then the big killy stuff got to kill my dangerous stuff. And you don't have enough units to be able to trade well. You have to make the most of the jank. You have to make the most of the maneuverability and durability. And so for that reason, they're really punishing if you make a mistake. You can't afford to just lose a unit. If you lose a unit unexpectedly, then it really, really hurts, and you can be struggling there. So therefore, they're the sort of army which has a high ceiling but also a low floor, I think. Primary control isn't great. Although I said they've got high OC, scoring high on the primary, because you want your army, you don't have much, you want your army being off doing things. Locking down objectives is hard. Now, you do have sticky with Strike Marines, which is invaluable, especially sticky in your home field. But yeah, it's just something to bear in mind, that just dictating the primary can be an issue for Grey Knights. Linking to the damage output, the army just doesn't have rerolls, which means you're kind of just stuck with the dice that you get. And they're Marines, they're hitting on 3s, and as we said, they've got some decent profiles. But yeah, rerolls, they just don't really exist in the army. And although being able to play into everything is lovely, they don't excel realistically in any key matchups, depending on the build you go for. But a more general build doesn't excel, which means in singles, you are having to play well. And I had that recently. I built a list for the LGT, the London Grand Tournament, where I wanted to be able to have a game into everything, and I just wasn't well practiced. I was not playing particularly well at the time. It didn't go according to plan, simply because I'd taken the list that gave me game, but I was still having to play really well and basically outplay my opponent. So yeah, they don't excel in anything, which obviously some people like to have. So the army rule: teleport assault. We obviously normally play 2,000 points, so that means that you're going to pick up 3 units, not in engagement range, at the end of your opponent's turn, and you can then set them up next turn. Because your army pretty much all has deep strike, it means that you can just deep strike down wherever you like. Incredibly important, as I said. Enables you to allocate your damage into various specific parts of the board and then go somewhere else. Or it enables you to flee a certain area when your opponent has decided to lock down a particular part and you can then focus somewhere else. So just this ability as a faction is really, really strong. And it's probably part of the reason why the army doesn't have that great shooting. Because if it was a really good shooting army that could also do this, it would probably be a bit broken. In terms of the detachment rule, because obviously we are just an index army at the moment, every time you advance, it's automatically a 6, and you also gain fly. This is really, really nice. Now, the army doesn't have a huge amount of benefits from advancing. The Dread Knights have advance, shoot, advance, and charge, as well as fall back and do those things. But other than that, you spend 1 CP to get assault on your guns. Cool. There's no advance and charge, though, in terms of your infantry. But just having that reliability to even a Terminator unit just go, I'm going to go 11 and get to this point, right? And, if you now come near me, I'm going to run away from you. That's great. Just that reliability of the 6 inches, we really like that. So it's a great detachment rule. It'd be really interesting to see what happens when the codex comes out. Right, here we go. The juicy stuff, stratagems. So death from the warp. Okay, so 1 CP. It's important to note when you drop down. Okay, so you don't do it in your shooting phase. You don't do it in your fight phase. You do it when you drop down. You get assault. Or if you've advanced, sorry, you get assault and you get +1 to hit. This used to be more used when assault gave you actions. These days, it's realistically used on Dread Knights who have advanced 14 inches and want to be +1 to hit for their shooting and fighting. The difference, because they only have 6 shots and 5 attacks in combat, getting to 2s rather than 3s actually does really make a big difference. So that's when you will use this, but your CP is valuable. It's probably not that common, but yeah, that's probably where you're going to see it most when you've decided to advance a Dread Knight. So this stratagem is 2 CP, and again, when you drop down, you can give Deep Strike. Sorry, not Deep Strike. You could give yourself Lone Op. This was okay when it was 12 inches, as it says on the stratagem. As you may or may not be aware, now it's 18 inches. This means that it's very, very niche in when you can use it. Obviously, there might be a situation where you can measure it out and lock down a natural expansion objective, for example, where your opponent can't get to. But the reality is you will virtually never see this stratagem used now. For 1 CP even, it probably wouldn't be that common at 18 inches. At 2 CP, it's just, you're not going to do it. However, this stratagem, you are probably going to hammer every single turn if your opponent gives you the chance. This is the stratagem for the army. It's got to be one of the best stratagems in the game, in my opinion. I mean, it's just so incredible. So, what happens? Well, your opponent makes a move. That could be a normal move, it could be an advance, it could be a fallback. Okay, nothing to do with charging, only in the movement phase. They've finished within 9 inches of you. You can say, there are 1 or 2 things I could now do. I can make a normal move of up to 6 inches. So, for example, you could move to the other side of a wall. You could move a bit more out of charge range. Lots of different things there. What's more likely is you are going to pick that unit up and put it into Deep Strike. That is so good. Because there's obviously another stratagem, Rapid Ingress, which you can then use because we're in your opponent's movement phase, aren't we? And at the end of that, you could then Rapid Ingress down somewhere else. Basically, every turn, when you put your units in certain places, you want to be thinking, which is my unit that I'm going to be missing this turn? And you go from there. and then you can put your opponents in some really tricky situations. You can use the stratagem to like threaten areas of the board, control objectives. There are just so many wonderful ways of using this, which I will go into in the next video. But yeah, this is an incredible stratagem, and just get playing with Grey Knights, use it, and you will see just how annoying it is for your opponent. Sometimes your opponents just end up going, well, I guess I'm just going for 9-inch charges, and I'm like, be my guest, until they make it. But generally, it's really good. It enables you to control space, which is obviously really, really important. So this is your best stratagem. Another really good stratagem is 3-inch deep strike. So this enables you to obviously come in just over 3 inches away. That means you can get into some really hard to reach areas. It means you can steal objectives. It means you can get lines of sight with killy shooty units like paladins or purifiers or even a dread knight. So yeah, we all love a 3-inch deep strike unless it's being done to us. Yeah, really, really powerful. The third stratagem after Mr. Deimos and prognosticated arrival that you'll probably be using regularly is Armor of Contempt, or in Grey Knight form, it's True Silver Armor. It basically reduces your opponent's AP. So, yeah. Oh, I'm in cover. Oh, -1 AP. Oh, I've got a 2-up save against -2. I will take that. Oh, -3, which is, let's face it, most heavy guns these days. Or that anti-tank. Still got a 3-up save. Really, really good. Finally, Radiant Strike. So this gives you dev wounds in combat. It's okay. The most obvious example of where it's good is Drago. So Drago is anti-demon 2+. That means that if you use the stratagem on Drago or Drago's unit, then when he comes to fight against a demon, he will be doing devastating wounds on 2s to wound against anything with the demon keyword. That is obviously really good. Other than that, you're probably not spending it. If you've got a Grandmaster in your unit, then you might well want to reduce it down to 1 CP once a battle. I've certainly done that before when I'm like, I really need to try and kill this thing. Because at the end of the day, Grey Knights in combat are only AP2, and if you're fighting into a 2-up save, putting them on a 4-up, it actually you might well not end up doing much damage, but getting the dev wounds there is nice. Very rarely will you have the CP to do that though, so it's more of a nice to have rather than a this is reliable, or I'm going to rely on this for my my output. So yeah, I've actually done a video on I Am the Hammer in which I ranked all of these stratagems and I spoke a bit more in detail about them. So if you want to see that, go check it out. It's in the playlist. But yeah, Mr. Deimos, most important one by far. The enhancements, right? So if we go first to the fray, this is basically enables you to come down from deep strike turn 1. So this is only going to be relevant half the time, because the other half the time you're going second, so you can just pick up and go do your thing turn 1 anyway. It's expensive, 35 points, I think, or 30, something like that. It is expensive. I think the play with it is you stick it on a character, or so for example, Brotherhood Champion or Brotherhood Champion and 5 strikes, and you build your list to go down the route of always going behind enemy lines and establish locus, and it means that you will always score your 7 points turn 1 for established locus and behind enemy lines, 3-inch deep striking down, and that is a play, and you can definitely do that. But other than that, you're not really going to see it, especially at that cost. Domina Liber Demonica is quite cheap. It gives a Grey Knight model only, +1 to wound. And if you're a demon, then I'm going to get +1 damage against you as well. Grandmaster Dread Knight, I guess you put this on, +1 to wound. You're already probably wounding most things on a 2-up because you're strength 14 anyway, but it means you're wounding vehicles on 2s, and demons you're wounding them on 2s, and you're getting an extra damage in there, so you'd be d6 +2 damage with your hammer. It's okay if you've got some spare points and you've built in a way that you could put that on something. Inescapable Wrath is probably the one you're going to see the second most. So this is +1 to charge rolls for that unit. That's quite nice, isn't it? So maybe 10 Paladins, 10 Terminators, maybe a Grandmaster, something which means that when you drop down, you're going to be charging on an 8 is quite nice. So yeah, it's only like 15 points, I think. So you'll definitely see this sometimes. But the one that you should be taking, because it is one of, if not the best enhancements in the entire game, is the Sigil of Exigence. So that means once a battle, your unit, and if the character's leading a unit, then actually this is going to be the whole unit as well. Your opponent goes, I'm going to shoot that unit. You then get to pick up that unit and redeploy it somewhere else. Immediately. It's not like goes into deep strike and comes down next turn. It immediately teleports somewhere else. Now, it is only once a battle, but if you think about the application of this, at the barest minimum, this is, I'm going to put this unit down here, I'm going to shoot you, you're going to then try and shoot me back, I'm going to go and hide away. So at the barest minimum, you're paying whatever it is, 30, 35 points for a free round of shooting from something that is very scary of shooting. Traditionally, this is 10 paladins, so that could be either 66 flamers or 18 side cannon shots. So that's the barest minimum. But then you think in terms of, well, if I'm putting it on this big scary brick, my opponent still has to position themselves in a way that they're bringing a lot of guns to bear on this unit. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit there and take the punishment. Paladins are -1 to wound, right? And armor contempt and cover. You've put a couple of guns out there just to try and trigger my sigil. I'm just going to sit here in a really scary position for you. And, I've lost 2 paladins. Oh, well, now I'm going to move and carry on being an even more of an issue. What you'll find traditionally is good opponents will try and trigger sigil as quickly as possible. Absolutely. But it is quite hard to trigger unless you deliberately go, you know what, I'm happy triggering it this time. But then they have to move themselves, as I said, in such a way to put lots of shots in there. So that means it's affecting their game plan. On top of that, they've also got to be thinking, if I'm going to shoot that unit and I am showing I'm putting lots of shots into that unit, where else can they go? And they're now having to screen off other parts of the board. What you'll find is if you can get to turn 3 and you haven't yet had your sigil triggered, that unit's probably never going to die, and is just going to bully the board for turns 4 and 5, because it's just your opponent's running out of stuff, hopefully, and that creates such a huge amount of space for your paladins to go that you can kind of go, right, well, I'm going to go over there now and be really scary in this dangerous area. They could line up their shots. You can sigil to a space that's safe. The amount of times I've sigil to a back corner, like sometimes people just don't screen their backfield, they're not thinking about it, and suddenly boom, that sigil unit's down the back corner. It's such an important stratagem. You got to think about what you're going to put it on. As I said, it's not really that useful on like a lone librarian. You want it more on, at worst case scenario, probably a Grandmaster Dread Knight, but usually it's going to be with a librarian or with a just a Grandmaster or Brother Captain on foot, and they're going to be with 10 Paladins. You want Paladins rather than Terminators simply because they're the shooty ones. You want to put them in a scary place, get the most of the shooting, and then sigil away. But yeah, that's kind of how you go about using it. Just an awesome strategy. So, what units do we have? Right, the characters. Now, I've actually listed all the characters here just to run through and talk them through, just so you know. They're not in a real order. This is probably a rough order of how I would rank them, but I didn't actually pay much attention to that, so it's not actually my true opinion. But anyway, so round about the top area, you've got Drago. Drago you will see in most lists. I never used to run Drago. I then tried Drago. Drago then fails his 6-inch charge all the time. For those who don't know, his ability, his key ability, you're taking him for two reasons, right? Number one, he gives him and his unit +3 to charge when you drop down from deep strike once a battle. So you've got a 6-inch charge. That is obviously really, really powerful. You will fail it more often than is statistically likely, I would say. I think I'm currently on, for a first time of rolling it, at one point I was on like 10 out of 12 fails. And the problem is, if you fail the reroll as well, sometimes you might have positioned that Drago's unit in a place where you think, well, obviously I'm making this charge, and then you failed it. And it can actually really dictate game plan. So you pick up that unit thinking, this unit's going to come down here and kill that. That's going to be an important part of this turn. Then you fail the charge and suddenly it all falls apart. The second reason you're taking him is because he is pretty killy. He's strength 8 -4/3 damage. That just cuts through anything without an invuln. And yeah, you can even one-shot vehicles if you roll enough fives. And because he's usually leading a Terminator unit, you'll get lethals on the charge as well. He's good. You can play without him. And he's a point sink. Him and 5 Terminators is... like 320, 335 points. So, it's a point sink, but he does do well. Then you've got the Grandmaster. Traditionally, this will be a Grandmaster with Sigil of Exigence, the enhancement we just spoke about, and he'll be with 10 Paladins. That's usually it. The Grandmaster gives you ignore modifiers. Now, that's really, really good, simply because there's a lot of modifiers around, and if you're wanting to beat up Necron Catan or Deathwing Knights or that sort of thing, then that puts you in a good place. It also enables once a battle, not even once a turn, it's a bit unfair, but once a battle, you get to take down the cost of a stratagem by 1. So that's when you might use your Deathwing strat, for example. But yeah, he's pretty good. Librarian, you'll see in lots and lots of lists. He's gone up like 2 or 3 times now in points. Basically, the Librarian's ability is you just pick a unit within 18 inches. It doesn't get around lone up anymore. But you roll a dice, and on a 1, you do d6 mortal wounds to you or your unit if you're leading one. But on a 2 to 5, you do 2d3 mortal wounds to an enemy, and on a 6, you do 2d6. Now, you'll see this unit everywhere. It's especially good because it gives you a 4-up feel no pain against psychic attacks, which is obviously great for the mirror and for the Thousand Suns matchup. And on top of that, just that ability to semi-reliably be able to put out on average 4 mortal wounds into a target. So you take 2 or 3 of those, and that can potentially drop a tank, right? The problem is it's semi-reliable. The amount of times you will roll that one at that critical moment, it's definitely made a couple of games really tricky for me, and I've even lost games where I've assumed that I would get through that damage, and I haven't. And so because of that, some people are really sold on them. I'm on the fence about them. But yeah, give them a go. See, I don't think I utilize them particularly well, but yeah. Brother Captain, this is more of a up to you choice. I played the Brother Captain a lot. I really like the Brother Captain. He gives your unit sustained. So what I would do is put him with Sigil with the Paladins. It gives you sustained on your psychic weapons. So you get sustained in combat. And because Paladins are hitting on 2s, that's roughly 40 attacks and 40 hits. And then and that's the same on the side cannons. That's 18 shots, 18 hits, which means they have a bit of an Overwatch right now because it should be 3 hits, which become 6 hits in Overwatch, which can be good. He also rerolls his own wounds, not all wounds as I first thought, but yeah, all his own wounds, which again is nice, especially when you're winning on 5s. It just gives him that ability to get some early damage in on a tank before the rest of the unit fights, or it gives a bit more reliability to that side cannon. I really like him. I've been leaning more towards the Grandmaster for 5 points more these days because of all the units out there, which you don't want to be, or that you do want to be ignoring modifiers on. So Necrons, for example, LGT, I was really worried about Necrons and loads of Catan, so I took the Grandmaster. Did I play into Necrons? No. Would I rather have had the Brother Captain? Yes. So it's a meta choice, I would say. Grandmaster Dread Knight does exactly the same as a normal Dread Knight. Doesn't get advance, charge, advance, fullback, shoot. All of the things. He doesn't get that, which means he's only moving 8 inches. So that is not ideal. His special thing is once a battle, one Grandmaster Dread Knight on the board, so that means you can't do it with 2 or more in one go. Against monsters and vehicles, gets to re-roll all hits, all wounds, and all damage, which in theory should mean he just takes out a tank or a monster in one go. That's a really good ability. His weakness is getting there. So you're probably having to use him as like a rapid ingress threat to try and get him into places, because 8 inches is just easy to play around. He also can get tagged. If you tag him with just, I don't know, 5 swooping hawks, he's not going to kill him in combat. And now he can't fall back and do his stuff. Yeah, sure, he can shoot, but he's probably going to take 2 or 3 turns, probably 3 turns to kill that unit, unless he's shooting into them as well. So yeah, I mean, I personally don't like him. If you're taking 3 Dread Knights, I would just take these three normal ones. But when you're taking 4, 5, or 6 Dread Knights, which is obviously quite a key list type, then obviously you're taking some of these. And you quite often you'll see one with Inescapable Wrath or one with Sigil if you haven't got Sigil elsewhere. Crow. So you're only taking Crow if you're taking 10 Purifiers. I'm going to talk about that package when I talk about the units. So we'll move on to Crow later. Tech Marine, obviously if you're running lots of Dread Knights, Tech Marine can give +1 to hit on a unit. Thing is, this is in the command phase, which means that if you've picked up a unit, you can't give that buff. So he has to kind of be near or positioning one to be able to give that buff. And it's got to be a unit that's going to stay on the board. I actually took one in my list simply because, yeah, I had a few Dread Knights and the buff was nice as and when it happened. But it's actually a cheapest unit, barring Imperial Agents. So he was kind of the first unit to die, just run out to the middle and just die for area denial or whatever. And I didn't really care. So that's how I ran him. Brotherhood Champion, I think this is a really interesting choice. So Brotherhood Champion's important ability is he gives you fights first. So you stick him with 10 Strike Marines, and you've now got a unit which has got, whatever, 30, I don't know, 34, 35 attacks, all hitting on 3s, strength 6 -2, 2 damage, and you get to fight first. It's a unit that is incredibly hard to charge. I've seen it used really effectively. I've also seen it used really badly. But yeah, I think there is definitely a type of play there. Some WTC teams actually tried this play with this kind of build. So I think it's an interesting one, and I think it's one to try, but it probably is a bit meta dependent. Brother Captain Stern. So he's got various abilities. He's just a normal dude fighting with 4 attacks, right? There's nothing there. If he's leading a unit, it gives you an additional mortal wound on the wound roll, or when you wound for your damage on the 6, which is okay. The reason you're taking him is because he's 90 points and he gets back up when he dies on a 2-up. Obviously, as we've said, Grey Knights are very durable, so you could put him somewhere, go on, kill him if you can, and 2-up save, in cover, that's hard enough already to get through the whatever he is, 4 or 5 wounds, but then he's going to get back up on the 2-up and carry on being a nuisance. I actually really like him. I tried him a couple of times and he didn't quite do as much, mainly because my opponent kept drawing Assassinate the turn I brought it down, but he is useful, and for 90 points, if you've got that free, I think he's a really good plug-in. Voldus. So Voldus, aside from having like some damage and a 3 damage hammer, which is obviously useful because you don't have that much 3 damage in the list, he gives your unit -1 to hit. So I have seen Paladin units which are already -1 to wound. If you put Voldus with them, that's -1 to hit as well. That is really, really durable. The problem is that means you then don't have Sigil on that unit, so that's why you don't really see him. His benefits don't really outweigh the cost of not having Sigil on a big brick. And then finally, the Chaplain. So the Chaplain's really cheap, which is great. The Chaplain gives you +1 to wound. So it does mean that something like a Paladin unit or a Terminator unit, they're now winning vehicles on 4s, or even the big tough units on 5s. Lots of things you're winning on 2s now. And it's cheap. So there is play there. It depends. I prefer to play more of a shooty style Grey Knight list, but if you were trying to really lean into combat and punch stuff, then that's definitely a play there. Now, in terms of the rest of the units, I haven't obviously laid them all out because there are so many. I've just picked out the key ones that you'll probably see. So, Strike Marines. We love Strike Marines. Strike Marines have a 6-inch scout and they have sticky objectives. Because you can't be everywhere and you don't have many units, it means that sticking objectives is incredibly important. Furthermore, the secret mission game is really important to Grey Knights, and obviously, if you go second, having that secret mission of putting a battle line unit in your opponent's deployment zone at the end is incredibly powerful. I think you have to have one unit. I really like 2 units. I tried 1 unit and 2 units of interceptors, and I didn't like it. I prefer just to have 2 units of strikes. So I would highly recommend 2 units of strikes if you can get it in, but at minimum you need one, 100%. Terminators, they are expensive, but Terminators flying around all the board is good. A standard Terminator, 2 up, 4 up. They've got Storm Bolters. They'll come back. They've got an Apothecary in the unit, so one does keep coming back, which is really good. They get lethals on the charge. Terminators, they're quite nice. You will often see them in 10s because not many armies can just chew through 10 Terminators. And then on top of that, you're then regenning with the Apothecary. Quite often you'll see them with Drago being a big nuisance. And their OC3 with a banner, which is obviously really good. Paladins, again, you'll probably see these in 10s, not 5s. 5s isn't that great in my opinion, but 10s are big and scary with a character. As I've said previously, they are -1 to wound, so that's like kind of their survivable element compared to the Apothecary, bringing them back with Terminators. These guys hit on 2s, so they don't get lethals, but they hit on 2s instead, which means that, side cannons at strength 8, -1, 2 damage, 18 shots in that unit if you've got a character there. That's really nice. So yeah, Paladin's good shooting unit. You'll often see Sigil with that unit. Interceptors, so they're power armor Grey Knights, still with a 2-up save. They're moving 12 rather than 6. They don't scout though. Their thing is that they fire and fade. So in theory, you could move them 12, you could fire them and they move 6 more. You could, in theory, advance them so they get to go 18. You could then spend a CP to give them assault, and then you could be moving 24 with them to get onto a spot. They are only OC1, but sometimes that's enough. I really like interceptors. It's interesting, you probably don't see that many of the most famous top lists taking interceptors, but I really like their utility. Just you've managed to scream me out from behind enemy lines. Oh well, not from a unit that fire and fades, and 3-inch deep strike and then a fire and fade. That's really nice. Their output's like just the same as a normal strike. You can give them a flamer, which is strength 6 -1 damage, d6 shots, so that's all right. But yeah, I like interceptors, and they're 10 points more than strikes, so they're 130. Now, Dread Knights. Dread Knights initially were awful, and then they changed their guns. So their heavy side cannon is 6 shots, strength 10, hit on 3s, unless you've paid to make them hit on 2s. But they are -2, 3 damage. The important thing is that they ignore cover. So the problem with Dread Knights is their lack of reliability. With only 6 attack, 6 shots with the heavy side cannon, 2d6 flamer at strength 6 -1 damage, because that's the loadout you'll always take, is also good, but they're just not reliable. One of them's just not reliable, so then you have to take more than one, which is why you'll still, and for quite a while I imagine, still see people taking 6 of these guys. Because funnily enough, when you're firing 3, 4 of them into a target, the mass evens itself out, and they can really punch up. And they are durable, right? 2 up, 4 up invuln, 13 wounds. I mean, they're only T8, but they're very annoying to shift. That's why they've steadily gone up and up in points. So yeah, I will say that don't take 1 or 2 of them. I took 2 of them to LGT and it just wasn't enough. I think you either go 0, because there are builds which take 0, or you take a minimum of 3. That would be my advice. Right, Purifiers. Now, I ran Purifiers a lot, and I really, really like Purifiers. Their thing is that they obviously have Storm Bolters. They can, as a 10, take 4 Flamers, and as we said, the Flamers are good, right? 4d6, strength 6, -1, 1 damage. That's brutal. But they've also got an anti-infantry weapon, or their spell, their Purifying Flame, which is -1, ignoring cover, 1 damage, anti-infantry 2+. No way to get dev wounds, that'd be broken. But it means you can just eviscerate units of infantry. Now, they only get 1 shot, but if you put Crow with them, they get an additional shot. So it's 2 shots each. So that's 20 shots. And then Crow also gives himself an additional one. So I think it's 24 shots from the unit, which are hitting on 3s. If you've lost a model in your unit, you're now hitting on 2s. So you get +1 to hit for that. So 2s and 2s into infantry at -1, ignoring cover is really good. If the unit goes below half strength, you then get +1 to wound. That's or suddenly affecting your flamers, your combat. I've had situations where like 10 Khorne berserkers have charged into Crow's unit. I've armor contempted, so I'm now on 2 up saves. Master of Executions has killed, Crow and some. The berserkers have managed to kill enough that the unit's gone just below half strength. And then those 4 guys have just wiped out all of the berserkers because suddenly it's 12 on 2s and 2s, and nearly that whole unit is dead. So yeah, I think they're a really cool unit. I really like them. I use them a lot. The problem is they're expensive for what they do. It's 125 points for 5, so it's 250 points for 10. Crow's like 80, 85, so you're paying like, essentially it's the same cost as Drago and 5 Terminators, and that is probably a flex choice that you are having to make. I ran Purifiers for a very long time. I really like them. I have moved away from them for now. I would more than happily put them in. I know lots of people who say that they're just not worth it, and I can absolutely see that. In some matchups, they're a complete waste of time. As soon as you're playing tonight, so they don't do anything apart from cover space. If you're in an infantry meta, they're amazing, and you will get value out of them. You guys, I've quite easily beaten Ironstorm, and without using purifiers. Really, they just sat at the back. But then I've drawn Assassinate, and I'm like, right, you go to the back, you go kill a character, 3-inch deep strike, and then you're going to take an entire Ironstorm shooting to the face with armor, contempt, and cover. That's fine. That does the job, right? So yeah, I think you can definitely try purifiers. I really like them. I miss them when I don't use them sometimes. And then finally, Purgation Squads. Now they did take a bit of a nerf when indirect fire can no longer be used with torrent weapons, because you used to be able to sit flamers behind a wall and then just flame something. And again, 4d6, strength 6, -1 damage flames is pretty nice. Some people say about putting side cannons on them and coming down up high, which means then you'll get -1, an additional AP, which basically mitigates the cover save that your opponent's getting from firing indirect. And they're already -1. 12 shots in on 3s, strength 8, -1, 2 damage. It's all right. If you're taking like a full MSU build of power armor and that sort of thing, I could definitely see you taking them, but quite often they don't quite fit. They have just gone down to 120 points, but you would rather take strikes than this if it was a choice. So that's the units. Hopefully that kind of has just given you a basic vibe for where they're at. So I'm now going to talk you through some lists. So this is a really popular list at the moment. Jack Harpster has kind of brought it back into fashion after it did so well at WTC last year. The core of this list is that there are no Dread Knights, but there are 3 big bricks. So you've got 2 bricks of 10 Terminators, and then you've got 10 Paladins. To go with that, you've got Drago and 2 Grandmasters, one of which has Sigil, and they will join the Terminators and Paladins. You've then got 2 Librarians on their own, firing off their mortal wounds and just scoring points. And then you've got 5 strikes, because you always need a minimum of 5 strikes. In a Thousand Suns matchup, what you do is you get rid of those Grandmasters, and you put in librarians into the Terminator bricks, which then gives you the safety of having a 4-up feel no pain against all of their psychic attacks, which makes that matchup a lot better. And now that Thousand Suns have been hit hard and now have even less stuff in their army, it probably swings that matchup as favourable to you now, whereas it used to be rough. If you didn't have librarians, it was almost an auto lose. So that's one reason why. Are we going to see many Thousand Suns now they've been nerfed? Probably not. Obviously, this list does struggle to an extent for scoring secondaries because it just doesn't have much chaff. I think there is probably an argument with this list now to potentially drop the 2 librarians and run 2 strike units instead. So you've now got 3 units of strike units, and then the 3 bricks. I think that could definitely work. I think that would be something to try, because I wrote this PowerPoint before the most recent balanced data state, and I'm recording after. So yeah, I think that this is a list which is really powerful. It obviously does denial of secondaries well. It does denial of primary really well. It does mean that sometimes you're containing for 3 points with 10 Terminators. It's a list that requires a lot of practice. I've not played it before. Well, so I played it once a long time ago. I'm actually going to be working on this list in preparation for upcoming team event, because it's looking like a role I might well have is go down onto the light board and try and take out all the scary heavy shooting. So a lot of teams for International Team Tournament ITT, they put down a big shooting army as their first defender and hope they win the roll off for the light board. And if that happens, I am going to be one of the people going down and trying to take that on. So I need to start practicing this list. So I will be working on this list and seeing how I feel about it. So hard. So if you're brand new to Grey Knights, probably don't go down this route. Or if you play TTS, give it a go. But it's a hard unit to do. Another vibe is all Dread Knights. So 3 Grandmaster Dread Knights, 3 Nemesis Dread Knights. Then that's the core. Then there are other things you can do, right? I like this balanced version of Drago, 5 Terminators, and then 2 units of 5 strikes. So all your killing power is in all of the Dread Knights. You've got Drago and 5 Terminators to go and bop something, and then you've got your 2 units of strikes, doing their thing, move blocking, sticking objectives. It's a good list. It is a good list. It doesn't suit my play style. I'm not good with this list, right? But some players would be very good with this list. So if you want to go down more like the Dread Knight version, I think this is a really good place to start. And finally, the play the mission list. So at the World Team Championships, France, Northern Ireland, I think, took this list. So it's your take all comers, do everything, be a pain. It's a good list. So you've got Drago and 10 Terminators. You've got 2 Librarians, one of which goes with 5 Terminators, one of which goes on his own. You then got 3 units of 5 strikes and 3 Dread Knights. That is the list. Easy. Bosh. Does everything well. Doesn't excel, but does everything well. Really good teams list. Will give you a game into most lists. Doesn't have the Paladin brick, which makes me sad. And I have played this list at an event before, and I did reasonably well with it. I also made a few mistakes, which cost me a game. But I beat sisters with it when they were at the height of their power, so there's definitely play there. These days, since the points change, what I personally would do is, because 5 Terminators have dropped down by 10 points, what I would do is I would drop one of those units of strikes and I would turn it into a unit of interceptors. So I play 2 strikes and 1 unit of interceptors. I think that probably does make the list better. So yeah, that's the direction I would go with this list now. I think if you're learning new to Grey Knights, I think this is a great place to start as a list because you'll get a bit of everything, and you can just work out what you like. So this is a really balanced list. So that's probably where I would start if I was you. So there we are. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. This video obviously has been aimed at more of the sort of the player that is newer to Grey Knights. If you want to watch all the other Grey Knight videos, you'll see my journey as I've learnt the army, as I've done well, as I've then started doing badly. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. But I've played quite a lot of Grey Knight games now, and I like talking about Grey Knights, even if I'm better at talking about it than potentially doing well with it. I just don't get to practice as much these days. But yeah, if you have liked the video, please like, comment, subscribe. We do have a Discord where there's quite a lot of chat going on. I mean, our Discord has over 500 members for our channel. So yeah, and the Grey Knights chat is always growing. So come and join us. And next time is episode 2, and that's where I'm going to be talking about tips, tricks, and combos which you can apply to the battlefield. Either it will be a talking head thing, or I might well try and crack out TTS and record myself on there. Not sure when it's going to go out. At the time of recording, I've got a baby due in 2 days, and apparently they're a bit of a time sink, so I'm not sure when it will come out. But I will do my best to deliver. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining. I hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Take care.